Good morning. About a year ago, Drew Hancock asked me to be on the engagement team. And I thought about it and thought, well, God can't drive a parked car, so I should probably do this. Over the last year, Carmine and I have been talking about, what's so different since the engagement. And she said it's been kind of hard to put her finger on it exactly, but part of it was that the engagement woke up and opened up our eyes and our ears long enough for all of us to realize that our hearts were all in the right place. The engagement allowed us across generations to put into words how we felt and what we wanted for our future. And perceptions that many of the parents might have had about how they felt that children weren't welcome in the sanctuary was really hard to reconcile with statements in the report like, and I quote, "I wish I knew the names of our children like the pastors do. You could come to church for 6 months and never see a child at church. The sound of children in the sanctuary is like the sound of music." So I realize we still have some opportunity here, but a lot of things have changed to address the challenge of invisible children. From what we just did today to the October Day of Prayer last fall, that was so meaningful for our family to have the Children's Prayer Day. And then we did the experiments with Godly Play during Advent and Holy Week. And beyond these more formal experiments, there have been a lot of subtle changes that maybe all of you in the congregation haven't seen, but that we, our family, have experienced firsthand. For example, Iris, our 3-year-old, is a little too young for Godly Play, but Margaret has allowed her to go over the last year because every time Audrey would go, Iris would have a meltdown in the nursery, which didn't really work out for anybody. So between that flexibility and then just the flexibility we've had with Sunday school, the pre-K Sunday school class, it's been really, really helpful to have that flexibility for our family, especially given my accident and recovery over the last 7 months. So all of these changes have really helped us as parents take stock of our commitment and ask ourselves, what is it that we want for the children and youth, our children, and as they age into youth here at home, and what's our role in making that happen? So committing to be a member of this team, for me, has been a really humbling experience, and I've been very grateful and privileged to be a part of discussions among the team about learning objectives by age and stage of development and how those are best accomplished, and how we can meet those learning objectives through the curriculum and milestones that we acknowledge in the church and special programming. And it's made me realize as a parent that without the support of home, it's quite possible that I would not have been able to do this. To address complex stories like the crucifixion with my kids is something that I find challenging, and not because I don't believe in the promise of the resurrection, but because going into parenthood, I didn't realize I didn't know how to talk about those things with a 5-year-old.
So first, Ministry Architects, which brought their consultants last year to look at our program for children and youth, it's reminded me that this church our job is to sow seeds. And specifically looking at children and youth, to sow seeds, in partnership with caregivers for our church's children's faith journeys. So I'm going to give you a little background on one of our programs before Jen tells another story. Of course, I have to have examples.
Give props.
That's right, props, the Christian educator. So this is the tune, which is in the Godly Playroom. And Godly Play, walking into the Godly Playroom is like stepping into the Bible. You have the stories of the Bible surrounding you, Old Testament, New Testament, the stories of Jesus, the parables, the early church, and there is, of course, the stories of the crucifixion, death, and resurrection. And this stone has been rolled away many times, and the angel been put inside, and Jesus brought out. And Jesus is always this figure with his hands open. If you look at this particular Jesus, the one who's been crucified and risen, there also are the marks of the nails on his hands. And this is what the children of the church do when they leave. Godly play is based on the Montessori method, which I could talk about for 2 days, but I will not. But basically, the main tenet is the hand is the instrument of the mind, which means that if a child's hand can do the story, then the mind will know the story. So the participants are moving around the figures and absorbing the stories of their faith.
So this experience has been really powerful for Audrey and Iris, and we've talked about it a lot since Easter week. As recently as last week, Audrey was asking at bedtime about the story and telling the story to me. But she focused less on the stone that night than she did on the crucifixion itself, and she was talking about how sad everyone was and how Mary cried at the cross and how Jesus' enemies had taken him to Golgotha to be crucified. And she was very serious, and then she said, "That was not nice. That was not nice what they did to Jesus. Santa is not going to bring them any presents."
So if I were to say to the children after a story, let's reflect on this theologically, you know that I'd get a blank look. But in working with them, I see them doing just that. That's what our volunteers see. We watch them learning the Bible stories well enough to process it and speak to it in ways that have meaning for their own lives. And of course, the reflections are going to change as a child ages. Audrey's reflections now will be different when she's 15, 30, 50. But what a blessing for these children to have these stories inside of them. What a blessing for Audrey to have this story inside of her so that she can continue to hear this story. God can continue to speak through her through this story. God can continue to speak through all of us through these stories. We need to know them, right, for them to speak to us. This congregation has been so supportive of our efforts on behalf of our children and youth, sowing the seeds. There is an opportunity this summer for you to get to know our children and our youth, not just as Audrey and Carmine's daughter, not just as this grandson or this granddaughter, but for themselves. And likewise, and at least as importantly, it's an opportunity this summer for our children and youth to get to know you. So when you're in town, please visit the intergenerational interwoven Sunday school class to explore these stories together as a community. Thank you.